Hello, aloha, everybody, and welcome. I'm Natalie. This is Life After a Cult, where we talk about cult nonsense. We make fun, we laugh at the absurdities, and we hopefully brainwash ourselves in the process. Hello, everybody. Thank you, moderators, for being here. Welcome, everybody in the chat. If you are catching this on the replay, please do jump into those comments. Today, we're going to talk about what Scientologists really believe. What are some of the common questions, popular questions often that I get? And I've been getting a lot lately. And I thought, you know what? Let's do a video about this. I was actually going to do one and pre-tape it. And I decided I ain't got time to mess with all that editing and stuff. So we're going to do it because it does seem to be, and it's great that there's a lot of new people here on the channel. And we kind of want to get into a little bit more of the nitty gritty stuff about Scientology. If you have any questions as we go along, if you could put question in front of your question or something to make it obvious that I can see it, I'll take those up too. All right, let's get into this. Wow, it's been a while. I feel like actually since I just jumped on and did a live that wasn't a vertical. I'm going to be doing more of these because I have such a huge list of topics. And some of them I thought I could pre-record and edit and do that. And I'm just, not getting to it. So we're going to do this. Afila, yeah, it's been a while. That's another reason why I want to jump on and do some live streams in the afternoon, because there's many of you that, don't catch me on the morning on the recap, but you show up on the replay. So I want to try and pop in here and there and see where we can connect more. Welcome everybody that's coming in. Don Gloves, I see you there. Welcome. Again, you got any questions? Put some question marks in front of it or something. Just make it so I can see it. But otherwise, I'm going to go with some of the questions that I've gotten over the last several months. But again, jump on in if you guys have any questions. Kathy, I'm glad you're listening while driving. Aloha, Robin Miners. Oh, it's so fun to see everybody. Mama Opal, thank you for being here. Love Maddie. You're not a morning person. See, even more reason why I need to do this. I'm trying to figure out what would be a good time. Is it 3? Is it 4? We are doing a members only live stream on Thursday at 4:30. Which is tomorrow, I believe. Okay, let's jump into this. Hey, V-Bombs. Hey, Lauren. Yeah, it's great to see you. Many of you that I don't always see in the morning. Hey, Cricket Cinema. All right, let's jump into the first one here. I got a whole list. I've been keeping track. And that, of course, is the basic question of what is Scientology? And even though I am a former Scientologist, a former cult member, I'm going to try and answer these questions with basically what Scientology thinks. And I mean, you guys kind of know my opinion about it, but for many of the new people, you might not. Scientology will tell you that Scientology is an applied religious philosophy created by L. Ron Hubbard, who wrote Dianetics, which came out in 1950. And then he decided, you know what, I could make a lot more money if this was a religion. And he went the religion angle with Scientology. Now, what dude told Scientologists was something a little different. Because if you show up to all these people that've been buying your Dianetics book and stuff, and you're like, you know what, I need to get more money out of you, so we're going to start a religion. And I also realized that starting a religion, we could get away from taxes. We could hide behind religious persecution. They're persecuting us for our beliefs. We could do all that. So L. Ron Hubbard was like, yeah, let's go do this church thing. And they did. Now, for many Scientologists, the majority of them, Scientology is their only religion. But there are some who start off early on already practicing a different religion. And Scientology will say that they are non-denominational, meaning you could be Buddhist, you could be Christian, you could be Mormon, and you could still study and use Scientology. That is true up to a certain point. You can actually walk into any Scientology organization. I don't know why you want to, but maybe you're curious. Maybe you'd like to never see your family again. Maybe you'd like to be broke. There's a million reasons why you might want to walk in. But when you walk in, they will tell you, if you say, oh, I'm a Christian or I'm a Buddhist or I'm a whatever, they're going to say, oh, well, that's okay. We're non-denominational. That works only to a certain point because Scientology is structured they have a chart called their Bridge to Total Freedom. And on it are all the different steps to that you do in Scientology, one after the other. And Scientology is very much a pay to play religion. Cha-ching ching. You don't pay, you don't play. There are a few things that are free. These days, they have some free online courses that they offer under their volunteer minister training. They'll do the occasional free workshop and seminar, which is basically to recruit and get you in. So once you get to a certain point in Scientology, the expectation is you're going to move away from prayer if you pray from those activities, because despite what Scientology says that no, we're not denominational, you can totally practice your religion. What really happens is they consider that to be an other practice. That's what it's called in Scientology. And I can back this up. My mom was on operating Thetan level 7, which is pretty high up. And she decided, we were in the middle of leaving Scientology. We were under the radar for a while, meaning we were wanting to leave, but didn't have it all figured out yet. Took me 2 years to basically leave Scientology from the day I decided I'm out, because I was trying to get most of my family to leave with me. So my mom went and got baptized into a Christian church. She felt called to do that. And she got into trouble with Scientology, which of course my mom was like, oh, we're not non-denominational now. They didn't care. They didn't care. Cricket Cinema, what a great question. Did L. Ron Hubbard talk or write about his beliefs about pets or animals? Let me go back here. That I can recall, not particularly beyond being that animals are part of the what's called the, oh my gosh, is it the fifth dynamic? I think it is, in Scientology, where L. Ron Hubbard says there are different urges towards survival or existence, different dynamics, and there's 8. And this is what Scientology kind of hides behind, because they're like, no. Well, we'll get into that more when we talk about God and what Scientology thinks. But animals, he doesn't go a lot into it. I don't recall in my time in Scientology ever thinking, oh, but there was and is a belief that someone, a spirit, or in Scientology, they're called a Thetan. So the soul, the individual, is called a Thetan, that a Thetan could occupy an animal body if they so chose. I do remember something about if you can end up in an animal body, but it means you're kind of in bad shape as a Thetan or as a soul, something like that. But oh my God, who said waffle fries? Now I'm totally distracted. I can almost smell it. I am hungry. Bo Beat says, I bet you didn't speak the language of tongues by age 7. Yep, I was gifted. Wow, Bo Beats. Yeah, definitely nothing like that. But what we did do as children were training routines where we would sit across from each other, not move, have to stare each other in the eye, not flinch, any of that, and eventually be what's called bull baited, where someone would try to push our buttons and would do so over and over again until we failed to react to what was going on. That also is part of the Scientology indoctrination. Bina, that's right, pet clams. L. Ron Hubbard said that a long time ago, we were all clams, and that we worked our way up onto shore. We were developing lungs, I think he said, but the water coming in and out of the ocean caused us anxiety, and that is at the core of our anxiety, per L. Ron Hubbard, that we were clams. V Bombs, didn't Shelley have dogs? Yes, Shelley Miscavige and David Miscavige, I do believe, had 1 or 2 dogs at the international base. Everyday Scientologists, there's no rules against having pets or anything like that. But if you are a member of the Sea Organization, unless you're David Miscavige, the cult leader, you're not supposed to have dogs. How could you there's no way to take care of a pet in the Sea Org. Sometimes security, though, would have a dog. So there's exceptions to that, if you're David Miscavige, or, you need the dog for security to chase down Sea Org members trying to run away. Let's see. We did that one. Now, what is the concept of Thetan in Scientology? I touched on that a little bit. In Scientology, the Thetan is the soul, the spirit, the individual That is, it's us. And in Scientology, they would do this thing where they'd say, okay, close your eyes and picture a cat. I never like to picture cats because I'm allergic. So I like to say, close your eyes and picture an elephant. And you have your eyes closed, but you can see this image of an elephant. And they'd say, okay, who's looking at the elephant? You are. That's the Thetan. That's how they would kind of show people or in a way prove that was true. Selena, that's good feedback. 3 p.m. is good for you. You work early mornings and you're home before 3. Good to know. Good to know. I want to do more of these, and I kind of want to know what the sweet spot is for all of you. Juanita, it would be great to have data on how many people who got entangled with Scientology who had other beliefs and suddenly they said, darn, this is a cult. That would be great data. I do know this. Most Scientologists that I knew gave up their Christian beliefs or other beliefs. Most of them were Christians just by nature of where I live. But they did give those up and move away from that. When you get further up in Scientology, if you do not give that up, if you're still practicing another religion, you do get in trouble. Case in point, Joy Villa. Scientologist for many years, did a ton of Scientology, did training in Scientology, was a Scientology auditor, as they're called, did all the way up through the state of clear, which is when we'll talk more about that in a minute, but that's when you get rid of your reactive mind, supposedly. But she was a Christian. During the time she was doing Scientology, she probably wasn't practicing much. And I suspect that part of her beef with Scientology was she was getting pushback on wanting to practice Christianity. Because those two things, once you reach the state of clear and you're getting onto the operating Thetan levels, it's more something that you can say to family and friends, but that you're no longer really actually practicing. Wisconsin Bob, great question. Can you explain public? In Scientology, they don't refer to themselves as parishioners unless they're talking to the IRS or other religious groups. That word is not thrown around. In Scientology organizations, they refer to, so like if you're in the Catholic Church and you attend church, you're considered parishioners. They're referred that way all the time in Christianity. But in Scientology, you are public, which when you think about it, I grew up thinking that was totally normal. And I would think even my Christian friends, oh, are you public? Are your parents public at your church or are they on staff? And they'd be like, girl, what are you talking about public? But that is what Scientology calls their members, basically, is public versus staff or C organization members. There's really kind of those 3 different levels in Scientology. You can be an everyday public or parishioner, which again, they don't use that word internally unless they're talking to the IRS, or you can be a staff member where you work at a local Scientology organization, which is where you see many people who are live streaming and protesting Scientology. They're outside those organizations where they sign a 2.5 or a 5-year contract. Then there's the C organization where you sign a billion-year contract because 5 years are just, that's for slackers. And the intention is that you're committing to come back lifetime after a lifetime to be a good little soldier for L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology. Mama Opal, did bull baiting make you more obstinate as a child? I would think if you could listen to someone try to discipline you without reacting, your parents would have had a difficult time. It's actually more the opposite. Now, me personally, I was born and raised in Hawaii, and my biological father and that side of the family are Hawaiian, Chinese, and a little bit of Scottish in there. My mom moved from Florida to Hawaii, and when she remarried and we got into Scientology, my first stepdad was Japanese. And so I was raised in a Japanese household for many years because my second stepdad was also Japanese. And y'all know why, because that was grandpa dad. My mom divorced my stepdad and married his dad. So my step grandpa became my dad and my stepdad became my brother and my aunts. It was just a whole mess for many years. We just stuck to the original names. But to your point, I was raised, we didn't talk back to our parents. It was very much a culture thing as well, not so much because it was Scientology. Although, as a child in Scientology, as you're growing up, you learn real quick that anything you do to pull your parents' attention away from Scientology is not good. That would be a harmful act or a sin. In Scientology, it's called an overt. You commit an overt. And so if you're being out of pocket and you're acting up and you're distracting your parents from doing Scientology, then you can get in trouble for that. But personally, I mean, I would never even think of talking back to my mom or doing anything like that. But that had more to do with the culture that I grew up in than Scientology itself. In a different type of in a Scientology family outside of that, that's a good question. I don't know many Scientology kids growing up who mouthed off to their parents because we would get in trouble. They love discipline in Scientology. Ruth, what do they do with those of us who can't visualize things? Wow, that's interesting, Ruth. Huh. I've not come across that. I've not come across that. My suspicion is what I guess would happen is they would try to find a way to remedy an inability to visualize things by using different Scientology tools and processes on you. Whether that would work or not, I don't know, but I've actually never run into that type of a situation in Scientology. MS, can you explain to me why celebs who blackball people like Kevin Spacey but still accept Tom Cruise Christmas cakes? Oh, okay. So they'll blackball someone like Kevin Spacey, but they'll still accept Christmas cakes from Tom Cruise. Because for those that don't know, Tom Cruise sends out this coconut cake to hundreds of people, and apparently it's like a big to-do. Well, I think that Tom Cruise, when people think about him, they might find him annoying because of his views on psychiatry, the way he went after Brooke Shields back in the day, the fact that, he turned his kids against their mom, his adopted kids with Nicole Kidman. There's a multitude of reasons he's a big donor supporter of Scientology. He's taken advantage of free labor in Scientology through the Sea Organization. Sea Org members who dedicate 1 billion years of their lives work 24/7 doing things for him without pay. Be, so I think that when I think about it, I think it's because Kevin Spacey, if I'm remembering correctly, had some allegations against him, right? Some sexual allegations. That's not the case with Tom Cruise. What I've heard a lot from people is that they separate out the artist from the art, right? They still will see Tom Cruise movies, and Tom Cruise, I mean, he's a force in Hollywood. So, and who knows, let's be honest, we don't really know what they're saying behind his back. So they might accept the cake because it's a really good coconut cake, but we don't know what they're saying about them. I'd love to hear from some celebrities about that. I really would. Mikey Dubs, what do Scientologists think about cancer? If you're a Thetan super being, should it not affect you? Yes, there's truth in that. So cancer is a real hot button in a way in Scientology. The problem lies in not a lot of preventative care because Scientologists tend to believe that they don't want to create that or mock it up is how they would word it in Scientology. I'm not going to mock up cancer by getting an annual mammogram and expecting it. That's kind of how they would see it. So they tend to not do screenings. Many of them tend to not have good health care either because all their money goes to Scientology. They put Scientology above their health, above their family and everything. And as a result, can end up you can catch a breast cancer early, the mammogram, prostate cancer with a blood test that's a PSA that men start doing in their late 40s or 50, depending on your family history. There is none of that in the Sea Organization. It's not something that's encouraged. I was never in Scientology, never did I have a Scientology staff member or CERG member say, hey, girl, you should be getting a mammogram, or people should be doing these screenings. Then let's talk about the smoking. There are so many Scientologists who smoke cigarettes because L. Ron Hubbard did. And L. Ron Hubbard said, you don't get cancer from smoking cigarettes. You get cancer from not smoking enough of them. I don't know what he meant by that. One of many things. But the screenings and things are not done. What ends up happening when somebody has an illness or something physically going on with them, they are usually told, you need to do your next step, especially if somebody is clear. The state of clear in Scientology means that you no longer have what they call your reactive mind, which Scientologists believe that that's the part of your mind that records all pain and unconsciousness. And then when you smell something that was similar to when you got hurt, that's reactivated. And that through Dianetics and Scientology auditing, you get rid of that. So what ends up happening when you have no screening and where you push aside aches and pains because you think it's just being brought up from your auditing, there's a datum in Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard said, what turns it on will turn it off. So if somebody's going along and they're auditing on a Scientology level and they start getting some pains, they believe, oh, it's because of what I'm doing. I just need to keep doing it and it'll go away. And maybe sometimes that's the case, but a lot of times it's not. It means there's something more going on. And even though they are allowed to go to doctors, just not doctors for mental health, they tend to not to because they put so much belief that Scientology is going to make this okay for them. So that is a fantastic question. And unfortunately, I don't know how the numbers would work if you compared them to people who've never been in Scientology, but look at even Kirstie Alley, she passed away. That seems sudden with her cancer. Kelly Preston, and people do pass from cancer even when they get treatment. My Tony was one of those, did the screening, caught his prostate cancer. It had gone out of his prostate already. Then we found out he had a kidney cancer. Then we found out they were both rare and aggressive forms of cancer. And it just went downhill from there. In Scientology, there's not that follow-up with the doctor, and it's quite dangerous, in my opinion. In my opinion, many people have died unnecessarily in Scientology because instead of looking to medicine to handle what was going on with them physically, they looked to Scientology. Many people are told that if you do operating Thetan level 5 specifically, that it addresses physical ailments and things that are going on with you. In Carnival, yeah, he meant that if you smoke enough cigs, you'll die from COPD long before you get cancer. That is very true. Northern Girl, what do Scientologists think of dreams? Do they mean anything to them? As in, could it be taken as a past life memories, for example? Ooh, good question. No, they don't believe that. I think sometimes they get confused between was that in Scientology or was this a different thing? I don't remember a lot about dreams, but I do remember as a Scientologist thinking, oh, well, L. Ron Hubbard doesn't really say they mean anything, therefore they don't mean anything. They're just dreams. So there's no dream interpretation or anything like that going on. That is something that I read things about that after leaving Scientology, and I find fascinating. In fact, I had a dream the other day about a friend of mine who disconnected from me when I left Scientology. So I'd not heard from him. And it's actually the second dream I've had about him in a year. And it was so real. It's like he was there. And I saw his kids, and it was weird. But in Scientology, that wouldn't mean anything. Paralyzed to Paralyzed says the nicotine helps with the metabolic disruption the e-meter causes. Niacin dosing is also done for this reason. Wow, interesting. That is interesting. Gosh, it just never ceases to amaze me the different ways Scientology actually does damage people. Nisa, in this country, we have a dark history with Jim Crow, and to see Tom submit Connor to Scientology because of Slavery in 1866, it's really sad. Yeah, nobody should be subjecting their kids to Scientology. Jen Cass, do Scientologists have any feelings or beliefs about psychics or mediums or anything like that? I would guess no, because they believe in life after life. The Scientologists often think they are psychic or mediums. They just don't use those words. They call it operating Thetan abilities. So if you are higher up in Scientology's bridge to total freedom, you've done some operating Thetan levels. There's often a claim that you can you can perceive things and that you can communicate with people who've already passed because you're going to help them find another Scientology body. So someone's grandma might pass away and they'll say, as a Scientologist, my grandmother passed away. She's an amazing woman. I see you're pregnant. Could you please welcome her into your family and she can be a Scientologist? And that would just be great. So they don't use the word psychic or medium, but there are many Scientologists that believe that through doing this bridge, these multiple steps in Scientology, that you gain the abilities that a psychic or a medium would have. They just call it an increase in perception. They just call it something else. Adam, how do Scientologists relate to the concept of engrams once engrams are replaced by thetans? Okay, so I think, Adam, you're probably talking about body thetans. So in Scientology, nobody knows about body thetans until you do operating thetan level 3. It is highly confidential in Scientology, but anybody with an internet connection knows about it or who watched South Park. What ends up happening is when you reach the state of clear, this is a belief in Scientology, you no longer have any engrams, which are moments that are recorded of pain and unconsciousness. Now, body thetans you always have. You just don't know. You don't find out till operating thetan level 3. Then you spend tons of money exercising these alien spirits from you. So again, it's kind of something that it's just they see it a little different. So until you're clear, you have engrams. You also have body thetans per Scientology, but they don't tell you that. They got to sell you something else. You get to the state of clear and you think, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I'm on top of the world. And what ends up happening is people find out you're not. Why is this happening to me? Why am I sick? Why is that happening? And what do they say? You need to do your next step. They don't tell you it's because of body thetans, but they infer that there's more to be done. In fact, when somebody reaches the state of clear in Scientology, they are in what Scientology calls a non-interference zone. They're supposed to do nothing but get right onto the operating thetan level, because what they're saying is that, well, here you are as a clear, and your body thetans in this next case is right there on top of you. So you better handle it because it could get stirred up. Hopefully that answers that. They don't actually tell people they have body thetans until they get higher up. Jen Cass, part 2. But do they believe that maybe they can communicate in between those lives through mediums or psychics? Oh, yes, but a Scientologist would do it through somebody who is operating Thetan level 8. There's definitely this belief that people who've achieved operating Thetan level 8, which is the highest level you can achieve in Scientology, it's all that exists. They think that operating Thetan 9 and 10 are coming. They're not. They don't exist. So they would think that they could communicate with another OT as somebody who doesn't have a body. But they would not say, oh, I'm going to go find a psychic or a medium. That's considered other practices, which you're not allowed to do in Scientology. But you could communicate with somebody who you believed was basically a psychic or a medium, but they need to be a Scientologist. In other words, if you can't attribute your abilities to Scientology, they don't exist. But they definitely don't call it psychics and all that. Mikey Dubs, do Scientologists believe in apologizing for anything? It seems like it's looked as looking weak. Maybe I'm wrong. That's a great question. And there's layers to this. In Scientology itself, forgiveness, grace is not part of the equation. It's very transactional. It's very black and white. If somebody harms you in Scientology and you feel wronged by that, instead of well, let me give you the Scientology version of forgiveness. It's never like, I forgive you. In Scientology, if you do something wrong, you violate the moral code of the group, say you sleep with somebody's wife, you have to do what are called lower conditions, which are a series of steps you do to get back into the good graces of Scientology and the group. So part of that is you might need to make amends. In fact, there's something called the liability formula in Scientology that when people get in trouble, they end up doing. And you have to like deliver an effective blow to the enemies of the group one has been pretending to be a part of despite personal danger. That's word for word. Then as part of it, you make amends. So you have to make up the damage one has done far beyond the normal contributions of a group member. When you do that, you come around to either the people you wronged, whatever the group was where you violated the moral code, and you ask to be accepted back into the group. So you have a piece of paper saying what you did and then showing your steps of this liability formula, asking for acceptance. On one side of the paper, it says approved. On the other side, disapproved, line down the middle, and you take it around, and then you have to have people sign it. And you have to get the majority of people in your group or your organization to accept that, to accept you back in. There's no formal apology or addressing the group in terms of, I know what I did was wrong. It's more written in this liability formula, but in a very exact way. So they'll look at somebody who violates the group's moral code or does something against a person as being in what they call lower conditions. And then when they work out of it and ask to be accepted back, that's like their version of, and the apology is making up the damage. So growing up in Scientology, there's not this environment of apologizing just for apologizing. Not to say that people don't, especially public Scientologists. They tend to be the most not so they are extremists for sure sometimes who aren't staff members, but the real extreme Scientologists tend to be Sea organization members, staff members, and then occasionally an everyday Scientologist who's just like really drunk the Kool-Aid and now wants to mix it themselves. As far as it looking weak, in Scientology, there's a concept of, propitiation, where you're just like offering up, please, please forgive me. That is considered weak in Scientology. You need to make up the damage. You need to fix whatever it was. So it is a culture where, especially if you grow up in it, a lot of people don't get into Scientology, not these days, but till they were in like their 30s, say. Well, they've had an entire lifetime. So it will be part of them within their culture or within how they are as a person to naturally apologize. But for many raised in Scientology, no. In the Sea organization, let's take it higher. Let's make it even more extreme, even less. There, it would be considered in most circumstances weak because you got to make up the damage and get on with it. Get back to your job and get on with what you're doing. Now, after leaving Scientology and learning more about how the rest of the world operates and that it is a societal norm to apologize when we realize we've done something wrong, many of us, of course, learned that. But you're not likely to get as many empty apologies because I think a lot of times, I think people take it too far. Well, they apologize and they don't mean it. Where a heartfelt apology, when you recognize what you did was wrong, can lead to a change in behavior. That's how I see it now today. But the social nicety of apologizing because it's the right thing to do, no. I would say that's not a popular concept, especially if you grew up in Scientology. In Scientology, especially in the Sea organization, there's no small talk. There's not a lot of those buffers that exist, socially, where please and thank you, what everybody else would consider manners for many, because you're very to the point, very blunt, very, this is what we're doing. We're so focused on the job, on the duty. Hopefully that helps answer that, but feel free to jump in if you got a follow-up question there. Ruth O'Hare, how does Scientology explain the fact that operating Thetan level 8 don't have any obvious superpowers? They don't. They don't. And people just assume that they do, and they're not maybe talking about their superpowers, but they don't acknowledge that. They don't. Robin Miners, you're right. They sure do make a lot of money for people being in trouble. Because what happens is you have to get a security check, interrogations, reprogramming, and you pay for all of that. Like you pay out of pocket if you're a Scientology staff member or a C organization member and you have to get interrogations or reprogramming. You sign an invoice that says if you don't fulfill your contract, you will pay for this. That becomes then what's called a freeloader debt. When people don't finish their staff contract, and I don't know how you do that as a Sea Org member when it's 1 billion years, then you have to pay for it. So you still end up paying for it one way or another. Love Maddie, is it not until you start the bridge to total freedom that an adult joining the cult of Scientology finds out about exchange? Also, is that when showing affection, hugging, etc., becomes not okay? Great question. Let's break it down here. So exchange is a concept. It's not something that'll necessarily come up early on. And it's simply, if I give you this, you're going to give me something. If I do this for you, you're going to do something for me. The concept itself is fine. Even when we're raising kids, we want them to understand the worth of $1 or that they should contribute within the family where it's age appropriate. Key point there, age appropriate. But in Scientology, it's very transactional. And it isn't, you're just doing something for the niceness of it. Just because you feel like doing something nice for somebody. That's something that years after leaving Scientology, I realized, wow, wait a minute. If I want to do something nice for somebody, I can just do it. There doesn't need to be an expectation of something back. I kind of feel at the same time, though, that's not limited to Scientology. I feel like there's a lot of people who think that an invitation to something is an invoice for a gift. And there's just this obligation. And I know socially that's kind of how it goes. That's not so much the case in Scientology. For one, nobody's like really having that many parties because you got to be spending your money on Scientology. Not that they don't. They do celebrate birthdays and people who choose to celebrate Christmas. But this idea of not being in exchange, they take it to an extreme. So what Scientology does a lot of the times is they take concepts that on the surface make sense and they turn it into an extreme. They get fanatical about it. And that's where it gets culty. Now, when you talk about showing affection, hugging, it's not that it's not okay. And everyday Scientologists who are public or parishioners, there's no rules that they can't hug their kids and be loving parents. Many of them are. Some of them are not. And that could either be because of their past, how they grew up, or if you're in the C organization or a staff member, it's always like business, 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 right? Scientology, Scientology, Scientology. You don't have time for all that nicey nice stuff. I grew up not in the C organization, but I grew up in a Scientology household, a multi-generation Scientology household. And I barely remember being hugged or any type of nurturing like that. I was raised to contribute and to, excel, which is not a bad thing, but in regard to Scientology, I was raised to become a Sea Org member, to be competent, to be able to do any job given to me, all in the name of Scientology. And if you're all babying a child, this is kind of the viewpoint and of some Scientologists. I want to make that really clear. This is not the viewpoint of all of them, but it's a popular point of view, especially for staff members and in the C organization. There's not as much of that, hugging and all that. I always hugged my kids. But I didn't get a lot of that growing up. It didn't seem to be a normal thing, to the point where it was years before even I would hug my sister. And you guys know I love my sister Lana. I would bury a body for that girl, okay? She started forcing hugs 5 or 6 years ago. I forgot when it was, and she's like, "We're gonna start hugging." It was just so unnatural because we didn't grow up that way. And I hug my friends. I love hugs. I am a big hugger. Um, but it takes you gotta undo that sometime, but it's not normally a big part of it. But I've run into Scientologists, and they will greet you warmly and give you a hug. It's really the extremists, like when you're in the Sea organization or maybe some staff members. So it's not that no Scientologists go around hugging each other, they do, but it's not as popular as it is outside of Scientology because that's nurturing, to be loving. You got to remember, they raised us to be Sea organization members, to be effective and efficient little robots. And, if you're hugging a bunch of kids and nurturing them or nurturing feelings of community and friendship, you're going to have a hard time stabbing your friend in the back when you have to report them. So that's not encouraged as a whole. But again, it doesn't mean that there aren't Scientologists who are very loving to their children. There are. Let's see. Sassy Dad Mike Conroy. Do all cult of Scientology believe in the 76 trillion years in constant reincarnation? Great question. Not all the vast majority of Scientologists don't know about Xenu and body Thetans. They don't know that, all those, I think it's actually 75, 76 million. Was it trillion? I think it's million years ago, where Xenu was a galactic overlord. There was overpopulation. So he took all these people / aliens, froze them, put them in DC-10s or something, dropped them in volcanoes and blew them up. And then those spirits and souls then got stuck to humans. So most Scientologists don't get that far. That's just kind of the reality of it. Only ones who do through operating Thetan level 3 ever find out about that. As far as constant reincarnation, yes, that is a core belief in Scientology, is that you've lived before and you will live again. In fact, L. Ron Hubbard wrote a book, or somebody wrote it for him, called Have You Lived Before This Life?, where he really gets into that. And The History of Man also gets into common, like L. Ron Hubbard saying we were all clams back in the day. That book gets into a lot of common incidents, as L. Ron Hubbard called it, that we shared on what's called the whole track. So our entire existence, from humanity to even before. You can, in a Scientology auditing, it can come up that you were on a spaceship and flying spaceships around, or you lived on another planet. I mean, you can go millions of years into your past, supposedly. And they're not going to tell you you're wrong, because it's against Scientology rules and scripture to say, no, 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 you weren't Jesus in a past life. You can't say that. As a Scientology auditor, you just have to write it down. Dude thinks he's Jesus. And then it goes into your file. Mikey Dubs, if you're not allowed to call the police on another member, does that lead to people stealing from one another or getting taken advantage of when it comes to business dealings? Yes. Stealing, not so much. I will say this. Even though there are some major criminals in Scientology when it comes to business and other things, other outright criminal acts, a lot of Scientologists, they pride themselves on being ethical and truthful and honest. So there isn't as much. You'll go to a Scientology organization and you wouldn't think twice about leaving your purse. I mean, maybe not in some places, but in the larger ones, like at the Advanced Organization of Los Angeles. Plus, let's be honest, those people got cameras everywhere. Nobody's trying to get away with theft over there. But in my experience, based on what I've seen, I do think it leads to people taking advantage of other Scientologists because they know they can't report them to the authorities. What you're told to do is you have to handle it internally. So you might go to what's called a Scientology chaplain, which is such a crock, but they're supposed to exist to help you sort that stuff out, but they rarely do. Severed Audi on the grade chart, the stated end phenomena of operating Thetan level 8 has been watered down since the 1960s. was knowingly and at will cause over mental matter, energy, space, and time, objective and subjective. That's true. It has been very watered down. I mean, back in the day when operating Thetan level 8 was first out with the ship. So what was that, like the 80s? Wasn't that when it was said that L. Ron Hubbard said that Jesus was a pedo? And there was a lot of pushback to that. Next thing you know, the level got changed. How'd that happen? Very hush hush about it. What does the grade chart say now about operating Thetan level 8? Oh, you know what? I don't know, but we could probably Google it and find out. It's probably something like cause over matter, energy, space, and time. They keep it very generic. Very generic. Hey, Greggy, glad you're here. I'm glad a lot of you are catching up here. Bobit says Reese never used to hug a lot either. She said when she first started her channel, we all harassed her to start hugging hugs all the time. Now she says she loves hugs. I too loves me some big hugs. Yes. Hugs are amazing. My Tony gave the best hugs ever. And I do miss that. And in Scientology, yeah, there's not a lot of hugs. You might hug somebody you haven't seen in a long time, but not like I never saw Sea Organization members hugging each other. That was just like not a thing. We were all, everybody too is, you're on a certain level of paranoia of what are you trying to get from me? What are you trying to like, 2D flow me, which is like basically like flirt with somebody in the Sea Organization. They're so extra about that kind of stuff that it ends up creating an environment where you don't want to express any type of affinity or love for somebody, even friends, because it can be seen as, well, what are you doing there? It's looked down on. Again, that's in the Sea Organization. You can take, this is how you'll hear such different experiences in Scientology. You can take someone in the Sea Organization, take somebody who was never on staff, but was a Scientologist for 20 years, and you'll hear different experiences. There's kind of a theme there, but they're different. The higher up you go, the more extreme it gets. Love Maddie, do we know how many Scientologists that are alive today have reached operating Thetan level 3? I don't. That's a great question. I wonder if somebody knows. Oh, Bo Beats. Now you're crying. You miss your mom's hugs. I know. So sorry. Severed Audi, talk to the splinter group, Ron's org, started by Captain Bill in 83. They say Ron telepathically gave him up to OT 43. Whoa. So for those that don't know, there are groups of people who practice Scientology outside of Scientology. And Scientology calls them squirrels, or they're in squirrel groups, and considers them all suppressive. But there are people who decide that they still want to practice Scientology. And there was this guy named Captain Bill that became a big part of that. I didn't hear that part, though, that he said that L. Ron Hubbard telepathically gave him up to operating Thetan level 43. Wow. Beryl Cheryl says, my dad only hugged me when I made him hug me. And her dad was a Scientologist. That makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Bad Thetan, can you stay on an operating Thetan level for a while once you get through, or do they pressure you to keep moving up the bridge to total freedom? Well, some levels take longer. When you're on operating level 3, you do 1, 2, 3 together. That can take 3 months or longer. And that can only be done in Los Angeles or in Florida. And I think somewhere in Europe too, but I forget where. But you are pressured to keep moving. On operating Thetan level 7, that can go on for years, decades even, because you're getting rid of body Thetans on the moon. I'm not even joking. So there is pressure to always do your next step. They want to keep you moving because remember, Scientology is pay to play. So the more you do, the more you're paying for. If you're not making progress, they try to what they call debug. They try to debug you, like what's going on. In other words, it costs you more money. So as a Scientologist, you're very incentivized by not wanting to pay money to keep making progress. Love Maddie. LRH was still getting auditing to the end of his life. Why? If he was the source and was at least OT8 or higher. I don't know that he was getting auditing at the end. I'm not familiar with whether he was or he wasn't. But there's lots of auditing that can be done that are not the steps on Scientology's bridge to total freedom, bridge to total bankruptcy. There's a lot of correction. So if you get sick or something happens and you're really upset and or your auditing's not going well, or you think you want to leave Scientology, they have other auditing and solutions for that. So they can keep you tied up for a lifetime. It's almost impossible to do absolutely everything in Scientology that is there and able to do. Christy, ex-Scientologists are always talking about clearing the planet. Does that mean getting everyone on the planet to the state of clear? And what are you clear from? Your reactive mind. Christy, that's a great question. Ex-Scientology or in Scientology, clearing the planet. I used to think about it literally, right? That you are clearing every man, woman, and child. And Scientology will talk about that. Clearing the planet. I mean, they just had their video to get people to their propaganda video. We talked about that this morning. Apostate Alex did a video sharing the Sea Organization recruitment video, and they talked about clearing every man, woman, and child. My understanding as I moved through Scientology was you needed to clear enough people. You needed to have enough people through the operating Thetan levels so that you could release all of these body Thetans who were then, I guess, then clear and operating Thetans who could go become Scientologists. So that you don't have to literally clear every individual. You just have to turn the tide, turn the tables so that there are more people who are clear or at operating Thetan level, which if you free a whole bunch of body Thetans, the belief is that they'll all then go become Scientologists. And my question is, where are they? Where are they? Thousands upon thousands of body Thetans are freed from Scientologists doing these upper levels. They're not coming in and becoming Scientologists. The math does not math. So when you achieve the state of clear, yes, you're clear only from your reactive mind. You're said to be clear only on the first dynamic, only yourself. What you find out later on the upper levels is that you have all these body Thetans. That's why when you went clear, you're told, nope, that's just you. A lot of people go clear and they're like, what do you mean that's just me? This is supposed to be like the end all. They're like, no, there's more to be done. Then you find out about the body Thetans. So in theory, when you achieve the state of clear, you realize that you're the one who's been creating your reactive mind. You're not going to do it anymore, which is a load of crock because it was L. Ron Hubbard who told us we had a reactive mind to begin with. Then you pay all this money, waste all this time only to realize, wait, I was creating it. Yes, because you told us we had it. It's such a ripoff. It really is. It really is. That's right, main house. The math just does not math. It doesn't. It's Scientology math. It makes no sense. That's why they think they have millions and millions of members and that they are the fastest growing religion on the planet. I feel like I'm going to go out on a limb here, and this might be, this obviously doesn't apply to everybody. I feel like a lot of Scientologists are bad at math. I am former Scientologist, but that's maybe because of a lack of education. And that's an interesting thing too about Scientology is even though there's not an emphasis on education in the mainstream way of going to college and getting educated, it's all about doing Scientology. In Scientology, a lot of people become very good though at reading and duplicating and understanding what they read because you have to study Scientology. Scientology involves countless hours of study, of listening to L. Ron Hubbard lectures. So they try to give you all of these tools to make you a better student, because the better you are as a student, the more that you can do, the faster you can go in Scientology, the more that you can get done. That's the incentive there. Laughing at some of your comments here. Justice, good to see you. Example, David Miscavige knows that Scientology is nonsense in the end? Does he ever take a course, do you think? No. I heard that no, he doesn't do any auditing, none of that. That man's not going to let somebody audit him, because as part of auditing, you almost always have to get off what's called a withhold, where you committed a harmful act and you're hiding it. It could be as simple as, oh, I, I took extra cream when I wasn't supposed to from the canteen or something like that. He is not going to be telling some random or somebody, lower than him, his secret deeds. So that's why I think he doesn't get any auditing anymore. Ruth O'Hare says, if body thetans have been around for billions of years, the first human must have had so many of them, or did the excess hang out on other animals or something? Now, I don't remember ever hearing that they attached to animals, but it kind of would make sense that they could if they wanted to. In theory, all this is BS. But that's part of the math not mathing. The timelines don't add up with humans on Earth. And when L. Ron Hubbard said these thetans were blown up in volcanoes and then they attached to man, did they hang out for a while? It just doesn't add up. And it's one of many contradictions in Scientology. And if you ask too many questions, then they interrogate you, end up having more reprogramming. Because if you ask too many questions in Scientology, if you don't just accept what L. Ron Hubbard says as gospel, well, there's something wrong with you. You have a misunderstood word. You have evil intentions. You have false data, false information that they need to strip you of. No, no, no. You cannot think for yourself. Not at all. Severed Audi, right, doesn't have to be every living human going clear. After all, he said, a cleared cannibal is still a cleared cannibal. So some beings are not worth the bother. That's true. L. Ron Hubbard did say that, making the point. My takeaway, what he's trying to say is just that. If somebody is a cannibal, if somebody is a whatever, and you clear them, doesn't mean they're still not going to be a cannibal, because you're only cleared on your for yourself, or in Scientology, it's called the first dynamic. You still have to handle these body thetans. Now, if a cannibal handled their body thetans, would they then not be a cannibal? I don't know. And look at it this way too. If you're a cannibal living amongst cannibals in a cannibal society, that is the norm. That is what you do. So would that be something to be corrected? It would in our society. So it just kind of depends on how you look at how Scientology would actually address that. Bad Thetan, you're hilarious. Northern Girl, that might be a good thing to chalk or make a sign. Davy doesn't do auditing. How do you feel about that? Would they even care, I wonder? They won't believe it. Trust me, Scientology thinks that the international executives and everybody are doing all of the bridge. Why wouldn't they do it? Yet, almost none of them do. Sea organization members, staff members rarely do the upper levels. They get a discount, but they still got to pay. That's the thing. There was a time, there was this program called, you guys know about the birthday game. A lot of you do. March 13th to March 13th, different Scientology organizations play against each other to get their statistics up for L. Ron Hubbard's birthday and to make all of these points. And you play by division, you play organization against organization, continent against continent to see who wins. And back in the day, I don't think they do it anymore. We were told, staff members and Sea Org members were told, if you build your organization to the size of Old St. Hill, which is a St. Hill organization in East Grinstead in the UK, that you will receive all the staff, will get all of the operating Thetan levels, that they will send a group of trained Sea Org members called the Universe Corps. There was a name for it. And they would deliver the full Scientology bridge to everyone. Never saw it done. Even in organizations that supposedly did reach that size, they just started shrinking again. Usually it was all a house of cards. They were just being propped up to look like they were that large. Though some are definitely larger than others. Yes, Everdarty, they attached to humans once they were Homo sapiens on Earth. Huh? I know it doesn't make sense. Don't try to make too much sense of it, because it will give you a headache, because it doesn't. And that's why you don't ask too many questions when you're in Scientology. Bad Thetan says, if I were a cannibal, I would eat my Thetans. There you go. I'm clear. I agree. Love Maddie. Do you think the head of the Nation of Islam is involved with the cult of Scientology so he can control his followers and maybe also use Scientology? Scientology pays him a cut. Well, yes, Scientology does pay him a cut. Anybody who sends people into a Scientology organization and they pay money and do a service, that person who sent them is what's called a field staff member, and you get a cut. If I remember correctly, it was like 10%, I think. 10 or 15. It was like, anybody remember? Throw it in the chat. If you're on the replay, throw it in the comments and tell me. Because it was like you get a certain percentage if they do auditing and a certain percentage if they do training. So absolutely, he's getting a cut. Now, I would not be surprised at all, in my opinion, that he's not using Scientology to further control his members, because that's what L. Ron Hubbard did. It's what cult leaders do. There are other cult leaders who started in Scientology. Nexium, Keith Raniere studied some Scientology. The guy who created EST, which became then, what was it, Landmark Forum or something, but EST came out of Scientology. So I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it. I could see that happening completely. Severed Audi says Davey notoriously avoided actual Scientology courses at La Quinta. While training at St. Hill, he is known to have punched his pre-clear the end of his training as an auditor. You know, I think I heard that story. And a pre-clear in Scientology is the person receiving the auditing. Wow. That sounds vaguely familiar. Bo Beat, where'd you get that fluffy white hanging lamp? I love it so much. I think it's called a cloud lamp. I got it at Home Goods. Yeah, you need it in your life. And at Home Goods, it wasn't even that expensive too. God, I love Home Goods. Ruth O'Hare, being of evil intent, I'm wondering, with a world population of over 8.2 billion, might there now be some people who don't even have body thetans, as there aren't enough to go around? You know, again, because it's all made up and not real anyways, no. But if you think about it hypothetically from a Scientology perspective, there were so many. It doesn't all, a lot of it doesn't add up. But there wouldn't be enough to go around, you'd think, after all this time. I'm not sure. Kelly BC, I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad you're on the replay there, getting caught up. Yes, Northern Girl, that's why the leader of the Nation of Islam demanded all his members take the course. They started out with Dianetics, and they tried to say, we're just doing Dianetics. We're not doing Scientology. But as I understand it now, many of them are actually doing Scientology, which is disturbing. Not a good thing. More people in Scientology, not so good. Could you all do me a solid and make sure you go hit that like button and check your subscribe as well. Make sure you are subscribed. I'm going to be doing a lot more of these videos too, popping on, and I have a whole list, and there's so many more questions too that I have that we didn't get to, but we're going to do this again another day. But for now, that's all I got for you guys. Thank you so much for being here. I will see you all tomorrow if you make the recap, 9 a.m. Central. And tomorrow is Thursday, so there'll be members only live at 4:30. You guys get out there and have an amazing cult-free day.